Alfie Outdoors. The sun was up early and so was Alfie, out in the back garden before anyone else was properly awake, not even Annie Rose. The birds were busy and so was Alfie, checking his secret hiding place in the bush where he sometimes kept a shop. And high in the sky, way above the rooftops and the TV aerials, some fluffy white clouds were drifting slowly like a flock of sheep across the blue. It's going to be a lovely day. As soon as Alfie was dressed, he wandered right down to the end of the garden to take a look around. Right at the bottom there was a straggly patch where Mum kept her washing line, and there was a little shed where Dad kept his gardening things. It's a good place to play or to go if you want to be on your own for a bit. But this morning he found Dad there. He was leaning on his spade and looking at the ground. Alfie looked at the ground too, but he couldn't see anything interesting there. "Do you know what, Alfie?" said Dad. "I think that if I dug this patch over, we could grow vegetables here." Alfie laughed because he knew that vegetables really came from the supermarket in packets. But Dad told him they had to grow them in the ground before anyone could pick them and put them in a shop. "You could grow some too if you like," said Dad. "But first we have to dig this soil over and make it nice and welcoming for the seeds when we plant them." Alfie didn't think that digging was very exciting unless you were at the seaside, but after a while he fetched his spade from the sandpit and began to dig too. The digging turned out to be more interesting than he thought it would be, because under the soil a lot of creepy crawlies were living. They were interesting creatures like ants and earwigs, wiggly worms and snails in their beautiful shell houses. Alfie liked creepy crawlies. He crouched down and watched a whole army of ants pushing and pulling a twig along. It was much bigger than they were. Alfie wondered where they were trying to take it and what they'd do with it when they got it there. Soon Mum called Alfie indoors to have his breakfast, and then it was time to go to nursery school. When he got back, he ran straight to the garden to find Dad. He was still digging. He'd made quite a big space which was covered with freshly turned over earth. He picked out all the stones and bits of rubbish and broken plant pots and piled them up. Alfie found a little blue racing car he thought he'd lost and a wheel from Annie Rose's old toy buggy. Dad put all the leaves in a special place where he kept grass cuttings, and then he and Alfie made a bonfire of all the other rubbish. This was the best bit. On Saturday morning, Mum, Dad, Alfie and Annie Rose drove to the garden centre, where they loaded up a trolley with all kinds of pot plants. "Would you like a packet of seeds of your own to grow?" Dad asked Alfie. "You could plant them in a special vegetable patch." Alfie chose carrot seeds. He didn't specially like carrots, but he thought he knew someone who might. When he got home, Dad helped Alfie to scatter his seeds in his own special corner where they'd get plenty of sun, and then they got out the hosepipe and Dad let Alfie spray his seeds with water. At bedtime, Alfie was very wet and muddy. "You're a real gardener now," said Mum. Alfie very much wanted his carrots to grow quickly because he planned to take one to the goat sanctuary, which was his favourite place. It was where the goats who had no homes could go and all live together and be looked after. Mum and Dad took him there quite often. Alfie's special friend among the goats was Gertrude, a lovely grey and white lady goat, and she always stuck out her neck to be stroked and snuffled her nose through the fence. She was hoping for something to eat. Alfie wished he could tell her that soon he'd be bringing her one of his own special carrots, which he had grown all by himself. Every day Alfie went down to the vegetable patch to see if his carrots were growing, but there was no sign of them. And when Alfie's friend Bernard came to play, he looked too, but he couldn't see any carrots either. It was very disappointing. "I don't think much of this gardening stuff," said Bernard. So they ran off and kicked a ball around. Then they played being fierce monsters, lurking in the bushes and jumping out at each other. Alfie had more or less given up on checking his carrot seeds when one day Dad called him to have a look, and they saw some tiny little green shoots coming up where the seeds had planted. Alfie's seeds were beginning to grow. Alfie was very excited, but the carrots took their time. Every day Alfie went to water them and cheer them on. "Go on, carrots, grow! Carrots, grow!" he told them. And at last Dad thought they were ready to pick, and Alfie pulled up a big, beautiful carrot for Gertrude. He washed it and wrapped it in newspaper, and they all set out for the goat sanctuary. When they got there, Alfie ran up to the fence to look for Gertrude, but he couldn't see her anywhere. They asked one of the helpers who looked after the goats where Gertrude was, and she told them that Gertrude had somehow managed to get through the fence and was missing. But she said that she was sure she hadn't strayed far away and would be found very soon. And when they got back, Alfie cried at bedtime, thinking of Gertrude out there somewhere in the dark and not being able to find her way home. Next morning he was so sad he didn't want to play with Annie Rose or help Dad in the vegetable patch. He moped about the garden miserably. Then he took Flumbo and crawled into his special place inside a bush and wouldn't come out. Mum telephoned the goat sanctuary, but there was still no news of Gertrude. Alfie was in the bath when the telephone rang and Dad took the call. As soon as he'd finished, he let out a whoop of joy and ran upstairs. "Gertrude's been found!" he shouted. "She was in someone's garden eating their lettuces, and what's more, she pulled their clean washing off the line." Alfie was very happy when he heard the news. He didn't care a bit that Gertrude had pulled down the silly old washing. Next morning, he and Dad pulled up another carrot for Gertrude, and they all set out again for the goat sanctuary. When they arrived, there she was, and when Alfie held out the carrot, she came straight over and started to munch. Alfie was very pleased. When they got home, Alfie and Dad went to look at their vegetable garden. "Gertrude liked my carrot a lot, didn't she?" said Alfie. "She sure did," said Dad.